Tonight, imagine yourself walking slowly through a city that no longer exists in the living world. The streets beneath your feet are made of stone, worn smooth by thousands of quiet footsteps long forgotten. There is no crowd, no voices, and no urgency. The air is still, cool, and heavy with time. This city once lived, breathed, and slept just as modern cities do, but now it rests in silence. Lanterns glow faintly along narrow paths, casting soft shadows against walls that have stood for centuries. Doors are closed, not locked, simply abandoned. You are not here to rush or discover anything dramatic. You are here only to walk. Each step echoes gently, not loud enough to disturb the calm. Somewhere in the distance, a fountain drips water slowly, one drop at a time, unchanged by centuries passing above it. This city does not ask to be remembered, and it does not resist being forgotten. It simply exists in this moment, suspended between history and rest. As you move forward, the buildings feel close, protective rather than imposing. Windows sit dark and empty, yet they seem familiar, as if someone once leaned there at night, thinking quietly. Time here feels slower, heavier, and kinder. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing expects an answer. You continue walking, not toward a destination, but deeper into stillness, allowing the city to guide your pace, one calm step at a time. As you walk further, the street gently widens, opening into what was once a small marketplace. During its living days, this place would have been filled with voices, bargaining, and movement. Now, it holds only air and memory. Stone stalls line the edges, empty and patient. Wooden beams overhead creak softly as a faint breeze passes through, though no wind can truly be felt. The ground is uneven here, shaped by years of carts rolling slowly and people standing in quiet conversation. At night, this marketplace feels larger than it truly is, as shadows stretch calmly across the open space. You pause for a moment, not because you are tired, but because there is no reason to hurry. Somewhere nearby, fabric once hung, spices once rested, and hands once exchanged coins. None of that matters now. What remains is the shape of ordinary life, preserved without sound. A stray cat might have crossed this place long ago, but tonight even animals seem absent, allowing the silence to remain uninterrupted. The stones beneath you still hold warmth from the day, releasing it slowly into the night air. You breathe steadily, matching the rhythm of the city itself. Nothing here is broken. It has simply completed its purpose. As you continue walking, the marketplace fades behind you, not disappearing, but settling back into rest, like a thought gently drifting away. You turn into a quieter street where homes stand close together, their walls gently leaning as if sharing the weight of centuries. These houses were built for ordinary lives, not for kings or legends. Inside them, families once slept, argued softly, cooked meals, and waited for mornings that felt important at the time. Tonight, the doors remain shut, yet nothing feels locked away. The silence is welcoming rather than empty. You imagine narrow rooms lit by small oil lamps, casting steady shadows that never rushed. Beds were simple, floors were cold, and nights were long. From this street, you can sense how time moved differently here. People slept earlier, woke earlier, and listened more closely to the world around them. Outside, footsteps were rare after dark, making each sound meaningful. You walk slowly past window openings that no longer hold glass, only darkness and air. The walls are thick, built to keep warmth inside and noise outside. Even now, they do their job, holding stillness within them. Somewhere above, a wooden beam shifts quietly, not breaking, just adjusting. The city is not collapsing, it is settling. You notice how the ground slopes slightly, guiding rainwater away during storms long past. Everything here was designed for patience. As you continue forward, your breathing matches the calm of the street. There is nothing to remember and nothing to forget. The homes remain as they are, resting without expectation, allowing you to pass through without leaving a trace. The street gradually narrows, and the night feels deeper here. This part of the city rarely saw sunlight, even when it was alive. Tall stone walls rise on either side, blocking the sky and keeping the air cool. At night, this space becomes quieter than the rest, as if sound itself avoids lingering. Your footsteps soften naturally, not because you try to be silent, but because the city encourages it. You notice how even the smallest movement feels deliberate. Long ago, guards may have walked here with slow, measured steps, listening more than watching. Now, there are no guards, no duties, and no threats. Only the architecture remains, guiding your pace. The walls show marks of time, scratches, worn edges, places where hands once brushed against stone while passing. These marks are not signs of struggle, but of routine. People use this path daily, without thinking it would ever matter. The ground beneath you feels solid, dependable, unchanged. Above, the night sky appears only as a thin line between buildings, reminding you how enclosed this city once felt after dark. You pause briefly, not out of fear, but because the quiet feels complete here. Nothing moves. Nothing calls for attention. This is the kind of silence that settles into the mind slowly, smoothing restless thoughts. As you resume walking, the narrow passage opens ahead, leading you gently onward, without urgency, without direction, only continuation. The path opens into a wide, open space near the edge of the city, where the walls stand taller and the ground feels more exposed. This area once marked the boundary between safety and the unknown. At night, it was a place of watchfulness, but also reflection. From here, you can sense the emptiness beyond the city, stretching quietly into darkness. The stone beneath your feet is cooler now, touched by night air without obstruction. The walls rise steadily, built not to impress, but to endure. You imagine torches once flickering here, casting long shadows that moved slowly along the stone. Those lights are gone, but the calm they created remains. The city does not feel abandoned, it feels complete. Everything that needed to happen here has already happened. You stand for a moment, looking outward, though there is nothing specific to see. The night beyond the walls is vast and still, offering no answers and asking no questions. Inside the city, behind you, life once unfolded quietly. Outside, nature waited patiently. Both have now reached the same state of rest. The air feels steady, unchanged by centuries. You turn back slightly, not to leave, but to acknowledge the balance between inside and outside, between memory and silence. Then you continue walking along the wall, letting the rhythm of your steps and the quiet strength of the stone guide you deeper into calm. You continue along the outer road where the city grows quieter with every step, not because sound disappears, but because nothing remains to create it. This road once carried carts, animals, and travelers arriving late, tired from long journeys. At night, it was never busy, only functional. Now it rests completely. The surface beneath your feet is rougher here, shaped by heavier use and less care, yet it remains steady and dependable. Small stones line the edges, placed long ago to guide movement in darkness. The air feels cooler, more open, as if the city itself is slowly exhaling. You notice how your thoughts begin to slow without effort. There is no center here, no destination, only continuation. Farther ahead, the road bends gently, following the natural shape of the land rather than forcing it into straight lines. This place was built with acceptance, not control. Even at its busiest, it respected the night. The city did not fight darkness, it adjusted to it. You imagine how lamps were spaced far apart, allowing shadows to exist between them. Those shadows remain, long and calm, stretching across the road. Nothing waits for you ahead. Nothing follows behind. The road exists only in the present moment, allowing you to walk without purpose and without concern, guided solely by the quiet balance between stone, air, and time. As the road curves inward again, you find yourself moving alongside low structures that once served simple needs. Storage rooms, workshops, places where hands worked quietly during daylight hours. At night, these buildings were already silent, their usefulness paused until morning. Even now, they carry that same sense of temporary rest. Doors hang slightly open or remain shut, not abandoned, just finished. The walls are plain, built without decoration, meant only to stand and last. You sense how routine shaped this part of the city. People came here without ceremony, performed their tasks, and left without lingering. That rhythm still echoes softly, not as sound, but as atmosphere. The ground bears marks of repeated movement, paths worn naturally rather than planned. You walk carefully, though there is no danger, only habit. The night here feels neutral, neither welcoming nor cold, simply present. Above, the sky opens wider again, stars faint but steady, unchanged by what happened below them. You realize how little the city ever asked of the world. It existed quietly, did its work, and faded without resistance. This place does not demand memory or meaning. It allows you to pass through without leaving a mark, just as countless others once did. Your pace remains slow, even unforced. Each step settles into the silence smoothly, as if the city is absorbing motion itself, turning it into rest. The deeper you move into the city, the more the night feels settled, as if it has fully claimed the space. This part of the city no longer carries signs of transition between day and night. Everything here assumes darkness as its natural state. The air feels thicker, not heavy, but steady, as though it has been undisturbed for a very long time. You walk past long stone corridors where footsteps once echoed faintly even during the day. Now, those echoes have nowhere to go, absorbed entirely by the walls. These passages were built for movement, not comfort, yet they offer a quiet sense of direction. You do not need to decide where to go. The structure guides you gently forward. The stone beneath you holds a subtle cold, consistent and grounding. Above, ceilings arch slightly, not for beauty, but to support weight patiently. Everything here serves a purpose without drawing attention to itself. You notice how your breathing becomes slower, more regular, without effort. The city does not stimulate thought, it eases it. Even memory feels distant here, as though recalling anything would be unnecessary work. Long ago, this place may have felt ordinary, passed through without notice. Now, it exists without interruption. You continue walking, not counting steps, not tracking time. The corridor stretches onward, unchanged, offering nothing new and nothing lost. In this steady environment, the mind finds rest not because it is forced to be calm, but because there is nothing left to react to. Eventually, the corridor opens into a quiet residential stretch where the city feels smaller, more personal. These streets were never meant to impress. They existed only to connect people to rest. The buildings here are modest, arranged closely, creating a sense of enclosure that softens the night. Walls block distant sounds, keeping the space contained and calm. Even when the city was alive, nights here would have been quiet, filled only with occasional movement and distant murmurs. Now, there is nothing to interrupt the stillness. You notice how the ground is smoother in places, worn down by generations of familiar footsteps returning home. This was not a place of events or decisions, only routine. That routine has settled into the stones themselves. Windows sit low and unadorned, designed for light rather than view. At night, they would have reflected only darkness and small flickers from inside. Those flickers are gone, but the sense of shelter remains. You move slowly, aware that nothing is waiting ahead and nothing lingers behind. The street curves gently, discouraging speed. This area was built for walking, not rushing. The night air feels balanced here, neither cold nor warm, simply present. As you pass through, your awareness narrows, focusing only on movement and breath. Thoughts soften and drift without direction. The city does not guide you toward meaning. It allows you to exist within it briefly, quietly, without effort, before continuing on in its unchanging rest. As the night deepens further, you reach a section of the city where movement once slowed naturally, even when life still filled these streets. This was a place people passed through quietly, aware that sound carried more clearly after dark. The stones here are darker, stained by years of weather and use, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The air feels slightly cooler, not because of wind, but because the space is open enough to release warmth gradually. You sense how the city transitions here from shared living into personal solitude. This area offered distance from noise without complete isolation. People lingered less, walked straighter, and spoke more softly. Now, those habits remain without their owners. You walk at a steady pace, noticing how the road subtly widens and narrows, guiding movement without signs or barriers. Nothing here tries to impress or confuse. The walls are plain, functional, and patient. Even damage feels deliberate, worn into place rather than forced. Above, the sky opens again, showing a deeper stretch of darkness dotted faintly with stars. The city does not react to the night, it rests within it. You find that your thoughts no longer form complete ideas. Instead, they slow into fragments that drift away before settling. This place does not encourage reflection or memory. It allows the mind to quiet naturally, without instruction, without resistance, as you continue forward, unhurried and unobserved. Further ahead, the city grows quieter still, not because structures disappear, but because their purpose fades into background presence. This is a transitional zone, neither central nor distant, where life once passed without ceremony. The buildings here stand slightly apart, allowing space between walls for air to move gently through. The ground shows fewer signs of daily traffic, marked instead by occasional use rather than routine. At night, this area would have felt spacious and calm, a place where silence settled easily. Now, it feels complete, untouched by urgency or expectation. You notice how even the smallest details appear settled, as if nothing here is waiting to change. Stones sit where they fell. Shadows remain where they formed. The city does not anticipate morning. It exists fully in this moment. You continue walking, guided more by instinct than direction. The rhythm of your steps becomes softer, slower, almost automatic. There is no need to adjust your pace. The environment holds it steady for you. In the distance, structures blur into shape rather than detail, encouraging the eyes to rest rather than focus. This part of the city does not invite curiosity. It offers permission to let attention drift. Breathing feels even and unforced. The night remains consistent, neither deepening nor lifting. As you move onward, the city continues its quiet presence around you, unchanged by your passage, steady and calm, holding silence without effort. You now move through a stretch of the city where time feels especially distant, as if even the idea of passing hours has faded. This area once connected different parts of daily life, yet it was never a destination itself. People walked through without pause, focused on where they were going rather than where they were. At night, this space would have emptied quickly, leaving behind only the faint memory of movement. The stone beneath your feet feels smoother here, shaped not by crowds, but by repetition over long periods. The walls show fewer marks of interaction, standing clean and uninterrupted, as if they were meant to observe rather than participate. The air feels balanced, neither enclosed nor exposed, creating a sense of neutrality that encourages stillness. You walk slowly, noticing how nothing here tries to capture attention. There are no sudden shapes, no sharp angles, no visual distractions. Everything settles into a steady rhythm that mirrors the calm of the night. The absence of sound feels complete, not empty. It holds weight, as though silence itself has depth. You sense how the city has reached a point where it no longer reacts to presence, including your own. It does not acknowledge footsteps or breath. It simply remains. As you continue forward, awareness becomes softer, less defined. The environment requires nothing from you. Thought becomes optional. The city allows you to move through it without expectation, offering rest through consistency rather than comfort. Ahead, the city gradually opens again, revealing a broader stretch where structures thin and space becomes more noticeable. This was once a quieter edge of activity, where fewer people passed and fewer decisions were made. At night, it would have felt distant from the center, yet not completely removed. The ground here feels firm and even, shaped carefully to last rather than adapt. You notice how the air carries a faint openness, as though the city is slowly blending into the land around it. The buildings no longer press inward. Instead, they allow room for darkness to settle comfortably between them. You walk without hesitation, guided by the gentle alignment of stone and space. Nothing urges you forward, and nothing encourages you to stop. This balance creates a sense of ease that requires no effort to maintain. The city here feels resolved, finished with its purpose and content in stillness. You realize how little remains to observe. Details fade naturally into form, and form fades into background presence. The night does not deepen or lighten. It simply continues. Your breathing aligns with this steady environment, slow and consistent. Thoughts drift, unstructured and brief, dissolving before becoming clear. As you move onward, the city remains unchanged by your passage, holding its quiet state effortlessly, allowing you to pass through this final stretch of calm without interruption, without memory, and without urgency. You enter a section of the city where structures appear older, not because they are weaker, but because they have changed the least. These buildings were raised early, before later additions reshaped other areas. Their design is simple, direct, and steady. At night, this place would have felt familiar to those who lived nearby, a constant presence that required no attention. Now, it holds the same quiet certainty. The ground beneath your feet is level and firm, shaped to endure long use without adjustment. The walls show subtle signs of age, not damage, but acceptance, as if they have settled into their final form. The air feels still here, not trapped, but complete, as though movement is unnecessary. You walk at an unchanging pace, guided by the consistency of space rather than intention. There is nothing to examine closely and nothing to avoid. Shadows remain fixed, resting where they formed, undisturbed by passing time. This area does not suggest stories or memories. It offers presence without context. The night seems especially stable, neither advancing nor retreating. You notice how attention naturally loosens, how the mind releases the habit of searching. Breathing remains slow and even, unremarkable in the best way. As you continue forward, the city maintains its steady silence, unaffected by movement, allowing rest to emerge naturally through repetition and calm structure rather than distraction or change. The path leads you onward into a stretch where the city feels almost motionless, as if even the concept of change has paused. This area once existed at the margin of daily life, used when needed and ignored when not. At night, it would have emptied completely, leaving behind nothing but structure and space. That absence remains intact. The ground here shows little wear, suggesting quiet passage rather than constant use. You sense how rarely anyone lingered here, even when the city was alive. The buildings stand with measured distance between them, allowing darkness to settle evenly across the space. The air feels balanced and undisturbed, neither flowing nor stagnant. You move without thought, guided by the natural alignment of the path. Nothing interrupts your rhythm. Nothing draws attention away from the present moment. The city here does not hold history in an obvious way. It does not display reminders or invite reflection. It exists as a completed environment, content with stillness. You realize how little effort it takes to remain calm in this space. There is no resistance, no stimulus, no urgency. Awareness softens further, narrowing gently to movement and breath. The night holds steady, unchanged by your presence. As you continue walking, the city remains exactly as it is, quiet and resolved, offering uninterrupted calm through its unbroken continuity. You move into a quieter interior stretch where the city feels completely settled, as though it has reached a point where nothing further needs to happen. This area once served as a simple passage between familiar places, crossed without thought and left behind without notice. At night, it would have fallen silent early, allowing stillness to take hold uninterrupted. That stillness remains undisturbed. The ground beneath you feels consistent and level, shaped carefully to guide movement without demanding attention. The walls are plain and evenly spaced, offering no decoration and no distraction. Even in darkness, the space feels orderly, balanced, and resolved. The air carries a faint sense of enclosure, not restrictive, but calming, as though it encourages the body to slow naturally. You notice how your steps become quieter without effort, softened by the environment itself. There is no need to adjust your pace or direction. The city holds everything steady for you. Shadows rest comfortably along the edges of the path, unchanged by time or movement. Nothing here suggests urgency or anticipation. This part of the city exists entirely in the present, untouched by memory or expectation. As you continue forward, thoughts lose their structure and drift gently away. Awareness remains, but it becomes lighter, less defined. The city offers no questions and no answers. It simply allows you to move through it calmly, supported by its quiet stability. Further along, the space opens slightly, creating a gentle transition that feels natural rather than planned. This was once an area of minimal use, where people passed only when necessary and stayed only briefly. At night, it would have been nearly empty, holding silence easily. The ground shows little sign of wear, suggesting patience rather than activity. You sense how time moved slowly here, even when the city was alive. The buildings stand calmly, neither imposing nor retreating, allowing darkness to settle evenly between them. The air feels steady and neutral, free from movement or tension. You walk without awareness of distance, guided only by the quiet rhythm of your steps. Nothing changes abruptly. Nothing draws focus. The environment remains consistent, encouraging the mind to rest without instruction. You notice how even the idea of direction begins to fade. Forward and backward lose meaning. There is only movement within calm. The city here does not present details to observe or patterns to follow. It offers continuity, uninterrupted and complete. Breathing remains slow and even, matching the steady presence around you. The night does not deepen or lighten. It remains constant. As you continue onward, the city holds its quiet form without effort, allowing stillness to persist naturally, unchanged by your passing and unconcerned with time. You enter a long, uninterrupted stretch where the city feels especially uniform, as if variety itself has faded into consistency. This area once existed simply to connect familiar routes, used so regularly that it required no attention. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to settle without interruption. The ground beneath you is smooth and even, shaped by careful design rather than adaptation. The walls rise at a steady height, offering balance rather than enclosure. The air feels settled, unchanged by movement, as though it has remained the same for countless nights. You walk without noticing effort, your steps aligning naturally with the environment. Nothing here invites inspection. Nothing resists presence. Shadows rest where they formed, uninterrupted by time or motion. The city in this place feels finished, complete in its stillness. You sense how little remains to consider. Thoughts slow further, losing urgency and direction. There is no sense of arrival and no sense of departure. The night remains constant, holding space without asking anything in return. As you continue forward, the environment offers continuity rather than variation, allowing awareness to soften into simple presence. The city does not guide or instruct. It supports calm through repetition and stability, holding silence gently, without effort, without change. Ahead, the city subtly shifts again, not through structure, but through atmosphere. This part once lay slightly apart from daily routines, touched only occasionally, and left alone for long periods. At night, it would have felt distant, even from nearby streets. That distance remains, quiet and complete. The ground here shows fewer signs of passage, its surface undisturbed and steady. Buildings stand with wider gaps between them, allowing darkness to settle fully into the space. The air feels open yet calm, free from movement or tension. You move forward slowly, guided by the natural alignment of the path rather than intention. Nothing urges speed. Nothing encourages pause. The city offers no markers or transitions, only continuation. You notice how awareness narrows gently, focusing less on surroundings and more on rhythm. Breathing becomes automatic, even, and unremarkable. The night does not deepen or lift. It remains steady, unchanging. This area does not carry memory or expectation. It exists entirely in the present, complete and undemanding. As you continue walking, the city remains unaffected by your presence, holding its quiet form without effort, allowing stillness to persist naturally, uninterrupted and resolved. The city now feels almost entirely still, as if even the memory of movement has softened into rest. This stretch once existed quietly alongside daily life, noticed only when needed and forgotten immediately afterward. At night, it would have been completely empty, holding silence without effort. That same silence remains intact. The ground beneath you feels solid and even, offering no resistance and no variation. The buildings stand quietly, neither drawing closer nor pulling away, maintaining a gentle balance of space. The air feels settled, unchanged by time or presence. You walk slowly, not because you choose to, but because nothing encourages speed. The city does not demand attention or awareness. It allows the mind to loosen its grip naturally. Details fade into background presence, and background presence fades into calm. Shadows remain fixed, resting where they formed long ago. There is no suggestion of activity, no anticipation of change. The night exists here fully, complete, and undisturbed. As you continue forward, thought becomes minimal, drifting briefly before dissolving. The environment holds steady, offering rest through consistency rather than stimulation, allowing calm to deepen without effort or intention. Further along, the city becomes simpler still, as though unnecessary elements have quietly fallen away. This area once served a narrow purpose, visited only by those who knew exactly why they were here. At night, it would have been avoided, not out of fear, but because there was no reason to remain. That absence remains unchanged. The ground shows little sign of wear, suggesting infrequent passage and brief presence. The buildings are plain and functional, offering no decoration and no distraction. The air feels neutral, neither warm nor cool, simply present. You move forward without awareness of distance or direction. Nothing interrupts the rhythm of your steps. Nothing calls for adjustment. The city here does not offer variation or interest. It offers continuity. That continuity allows awareness to soften further, releasing the habit of observation. Breathing remains slow and steady, unremarkable and even. The night does not deepen or lift. It remains constant. This place does not suggest meaning or reflection. It exists without expectation. As you pass through, the city remains unchanged, holding silence with ease, allowing stillness to persist naturally, uninterrupted and complete. The path continues through a long, quiet span where the city feels almost abstract, reduced to structure and space alone. This area once functioned without drawing notice, supporting movement rather than defining it. At night, it would have emptied early, leaving behind only form and air. That simplicity remains. The ground beneath you is level and consistent, offering no variation to register. The walls rise evenly, creating balance rather than enclosure. The air feels still, neither flowing nor stagnant. You walk without effort, guided by alignment rather than intention. The city here does not respond to presence. It does not acknowledge sound or motion. It simply remains. Thoughts grow less frequent, less defined, dissolving before fully forming. Awareness narrows gently, settling into rhythm rather than detail. The night holds steady, unchanged by time or movement. Nothing in this space suggests progress or completion. It exists as a continuous moment. As you continue onward, the city maintains its quiet form without effort, allowing calm to deepen naturally through repetition and stillness rather than change. Ahead, the environment becomes increasingly uniform, as if distinction itself has softened into sameness. This area once supported quiet passage, nothing more. At night, it would have been nearly invisible, fading easily into darkness. That invisibility remains. The ground shows minimal markings, shaped carefully and left undisturbed. Buildings stand evenly spaced, allowing darkness to settle comfortably between them. The air feels balanced and unchanging. You continue walking, aware only of motion and breath. Nothing draws attention. Nothing fades away. The city offers no transitions here, only continuation. This consistency encourages the mind to release its hold on sequence and direction. Forward feels no different than backward. Time feels less defined. Breathing remains slow, steady, and automatic. The night does not progress. It simply holds. As you pass through this space, the city remains unaffected, maintaining its quiet presence effortlessly, offering rest through its unbroken continuity. The city now feels distant even from itself, as though its purpose has fully concluded. This area once existed beyond routine, used rarely and remembered briefly. At night, it would have been entirely still. That stillness remains complete. The ground beneath you feels firm and untouched. The buildings appear settled, holding their positions without strain. The air feels open but calm, free from movement. You walk slowly, guided only by the alignment of space. Nothing encourages awareness or attention. The city here does not suggest history or meaning. It exists as a finished environment. Thoughts drift softly and disappear without resistance. Awareness becomes lighter, less defined. The night remains steady and unchanged. As you continue onward, The city holds its quiet state without effort, allowing calm to persist naturally, uninterrupted and resolved. You reach a stretch where the city feels almost motionless, as if even the idea of passage has softened into rest. This area once marked a quiet boundary, visited briefly and left behind without thought. At night, it would have held silence easily. That silence remains intact. The ground shows little sign of movement. The buildings stand calmly, neither inviting nor resisting presence. The air feels steady and neutral. You move forward without direction or intention, guided only by rhythm. Nothing changes. Nothing begins or ends. The city offers no signal of transition. It exists fully in stillness. Breathing remains slow and even. Thoughts no longer gather. Awareness rests gently in the present moment. As you continue walking, the city remains unchanged, holding calm effortlessly, allowing silence to remain complete and undisturbed. You continue walking through the city as the night reaches a point of complete stillness, where nothing feels paused because nothing feels active. This part of the city once existed quietly alongside everyday life, noticed only when someone passed through and forgotten immediately afterward. At night, it would have emptied without resistance, allowing silence to settle naturally. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and even, shaped carefully to endure long use without needing attention. The buildings stand calmly on either side, neither close nor distant, creating a balanced space that feels resolved rather than unfinished. The air feels steady and neutral, free from movement, carrying no scent and no temperature worth noticing. You walk slowly, not because you decide to, but because nothing encourages speed. The city does not guide you forward or pull you back. It allows motion without purpose. Shadows remain fixed along walls and edges, resting where they formed long ago. There is no sign of activity and no suggestion of return. The night does not deepen or lighten. It holds its state evenly. Thoughts become brief and incomplete, dissolving before forming into meaning. Breathing remains slow, consistent, and unremarkable. Awareness narrows gently, settling into rhythm rather than observation. As you continue walking, the city remains exactly as it is, unaffected by your presence, holding its calm effortlessly, allowing stillness to exist without interruption, without memory, and without expectation. You move deeper into the city where the sense of direction begins to dissolve, and walking no longer feels like traveling from one place to another, but simply continuing within the same calm moment. This area once existed beyond routine importance, passed through quietly, and rarely remembered afterward. Even during the city's most active years, this stretch held a subdued presence, never demanding attention, never offering reason to linger. At night, it would have emptied completely, leaving behind only structure, air, and time. That condition remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels solid and evenly worn, shaped by slow repetition rather than urgency, carrying the imprint of movement without retaining its energy. Buildings stand at measured distances, their surfaces softened by age, not weakened, but settled into their final form. Nothing here feels unfinished. The air is still and balanced, free from wind or temperature strong enough to notice, creating a neutral environment where the body naturally relaxes without instruction. You continue walking at an unforced pace, guided not by curiosity or intention, but by the absence of any reason to stop. The city neither resists nor welcomes your presence. It simply allows it. Shadows remain steady along walls and pathways, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unchanged by passing time. There are no distant sounds, no signals of movement returning, no suggestion of change approaching. The night does not progress. It holds its state evenly. Thoughts become slower and less complete, dissolving before gathering shape or meaning. Breathing settles into a steady rhythm, even and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, focusing less on surroundings and more on repetition itself. As you continue forward, the city remains entirely unaffected, maintaining its quiet state without effort, without memory, and without expectation, continuing in the same calm condition it has held for countless silent nights. You continue walking as the city settles into an even deeper layer of quiet, where movement feels almost symbolic rather than physical, as though the act of walking itself has slowed to match the stillness around you. This part of the city once existed without identity, neither central nor peripheral, used only when necessary, and ignored the rest of the time. Even when life filled the streets elsewhere, this stretch remained subdued, shaped more by absence than activity. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to claim it without resistance. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels uniformly smooth, shaped over long periods by slow passage rather than frequent traffic, holding the memory of motion without retaining its urgency. Buildings stand quietly on either side, their surfaces worn gently by time, not damaged, not restored, simply settled into permanence. Nothing here feels temporary. The air feels balanced and neutral, carrying no wind strong enough to register, no warmth or cold sharp enough to distract, creating an environment where the body naturally releases tension. You walk at a steady, unhurried pace, not guided by curiosity or destination, but by the absence of any reason to move differently. The city does not respond to your presence. It neither acknowledges nor resists it. Shadows remain fixed along walls and edges, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unaffected by passing moments. There are no distant sounds approaching and no signs of activity returning. The night does not shift or progress. It holds steady. Thoughts soften further, losing structure before they can take shape, fading quietly without effort. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains exactly as it is, unchanged by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You move onward through the city as the sense of place becomes increasingly abstract, where streets no longer feel like paths leading somewhere, but like steady surfaces that simply exist beneath your steps. This part of the city once served no clear role beyond connecting quieter spaces, and even then it did so without importance or recognition. During its active years, people passed through without slowing, rarely noticing where they were. At night, it would have emptied entirely, leaving behind only stone, air, and darkness. That condition remains unchanged. The ground beneath you feels firm and consistently worn, shaped by long-term use rather than frequent activity, offering stability without drawing attention to itself. The buildings stand calmly, spaced with deliberate restraint, their walls bearing the softened texture of age, not damaged, not restored, but settled into permanence. Nothing here suggests renewal or decay. The air feels still and neutral, free from movement strong enough to register, carrying no temperature shift that would invite awareness. You continue walking at a slow, effortless pace, not because you choose restraint, but because nothing in this space suggests urgency or direction. The city does not guide you forward or pull you back. It allows motion without intention. Shadows remain unmoving along walls and corners, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or presence. There are no distant sounds forming and no signals of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lighten. It remains steady and unchanged. Thoughts become fewer and less defined, dissolving before they can organize into meaning. Breathing settles into a calm, automatic rhythm, even and unremarkable. Awareness narrows gently, focusing less on surroundings and more on repetition itself. As you continue walking, the city remains entirely unaffected by your presence, holding its quiet state without effort, without memory, and without expectation, continuing. You continue forward as the city settles into an even quieter state, where the distinction between different streets and spaces begins to soften, blending into one continuous environment. This part of the city once existed beyond daily concern, crossed only when required and otherwise ignored. Even when activity filled other areas, this stretch remained subdued, shaped more by absence than by use. At night, it would have emptied completely, leaving behind only structure and silence. That silence remains intact. The ground beneath your feet feels evenly worn and dependable, shaped slowly over time rather than altered by sudden change, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly at measured distances, their surfaces bearing the gentle signs of age, not damaged and not renewed, simply settled into permanence. The air feels neutral and still, carrying no movement strong enough to notice, no temperature distinct enough to register. You walk at an unforced pace, not guided by purpose or destination, but by the absence of any reason to hurry or stop. The city does not respond to your presence. It neither acknowledges nor resists it. Shadows remain steady along walls and edges, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by passing moments. There are no sounds approaching and no indications of activity returning. The night does not progress or recede. It holds steady. Thoughts become slower and less complete, fading before they can organize into meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains unchanged by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You move deeper into the city as the sense of separation between places fades almost completely, leaving only a continuous stretch of quiet space that feels unchanged in every direction. This area once existed without distinction, neither important nor ignored, simply present as part of the city's background. Even during the busiest times, it attracted little attention, serving its purpose without interruption or recognition. At night, it would have emptied early, allowing silence to settle fully and remain undisturbed until morning. That silence still holds the space. The ground beneath your feet feels solid and evenly worn, shaped patiently by slow movement over long periods rather than by frequent use, offering stability without inviting notice. Buildings stand quietly on either side, their walls softened by age, not weakened or restored, but settled into a final, balanced form. The air feels still and neutral, carrying no wind strong enough to feel and no temperature change strong enough to register. You continue walking at a slow, natural pace, not guided by intention or curiosity, but by the absence of any reason to change speed. The city does not lead you forward or hold you back. It simply allows motion to continue. Shadows remain fixed along walls and corners, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or presence. There are no distant sounds emerging and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or fade. It remains steady and unchanged. Thoughts soften further, losing structure before they can take shape, dissolving quietly without effort. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into rhythm rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains entirely unaffected by your passage, holding its calm state effortlessly, without memory, without expectation, and without interruption. You continue moving forward as the city settles into a state where even familiarity fades, and each space feels indistinguishable from the last. This part of the city once existed quietly within daily movement, passed through without recognition, and left behind without thought. Even when the city was active, this stretch carried no identity of its own, serving only as a silent connector. At night, it would have emptied quickly, allowing stillness to spread without interruption. That stillness remains fully intact. The ground beneath your feet feels evenly shaped and reliable, worn gently by time rather than altered by urgency, offering a steady surface that asks nothing of your attention. Buildings stand calmly along the path, their walls softened by age, not weakened, not repaired, simply settled into their final form. The air feels neutral and unmoving, carrying no sound and no sensation strong enough to register. You walk at a slow, effortless pace, guided not by intention or curiosity, but by the absence of any reason to move differently. The city does not acknowledge your presence and does not resist it. Shadows remain fixed along edges and corners, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by passing moments. There are no distant sounds approaching and no signs of activity returning. The night does not change. It holds steady. Thoughts become less frequent and less defined, dissolving before forming into meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, The city remains unchanged by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You move deeper into the quiet as the city feels increasingly distant from any sense of purpose, where structures exist simply because they remain standing. This area once lay outside routine attention, crossed only when necessary and otherwise ignored. Even during active hours, it offered nothing that encouraged pause or engagement. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to settle without effort. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath you feels smooth and stable, shaped carefully over long periods rather than adjusted or repaired, holding the memory of movement without retaining its urgency. Buildings stand evenly spaced, their surfaces worn gently by age, carrying no decoration and no sign of renewal. The air feels steady and neutral, free from wind or temperature shifts strong enough to notice. You continue walking without thought, your pace unforced and consistent, guided only by the quiet rhythm of movement. The city does not guide you forward or pull you back. It allows motion to exist without direction. Shadows remain unmoving along walls and paths, resting where they formed long ago. There are no sounds waiting to emerge and no indications of return. The night does not deepen or fade. It remains constant. Thoughts soften further, losing structure before they can take shape. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness settles gently into rhythm rather than detail. As you continue onward, the city remains unaffected by your presence, holding its quiet state effortlessly, unchanged and undemanding. You continue through a stretch where the city feels almost weightless in its stillness, as though even the idea of activity has faded completely. This area once existed on the margins of daily life, used briefly and forgotten quickly. At night, it would have been entirely empty, allowing silence to claim the space without resistance. That silence remains complete. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and consistent, shaped patiently rather than altered, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly on either side, their forms simple and unremarkable, settled into permanence without sign of decay or renewal. The air feels neutral and unmoving, carrying no sound and no sensation strong enough to disturb awareness. You walk at a slow, natural pace, not because of choice, but because nothing suggests urgency. The city does not respond to your presence. It neither welcomes nor resists it. Shadows remain fixed along edges and corners, unchanged by time or motion. There are no distant sounds approaching and no signals of change. The night does not progress. It holds steady. Thoughts grow faint and infrequent, dissolving before forming into meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains exactly as it is, unchanged by your passage, complete and silent. You move onward as the city becomes increasingly uniform, where distinctions between spaces fade into a single, continuous calm. This area once served quietly in the background, supporting movement without ever defining it. Even during the city's busiest periods, it attracted little attention. At night, it would have emptied early, allowing silence to settle and remain undisturbed. That silence still holds. The ground beneath your feet feels evenly worn and dependable, shaped by slow repetition rather than frequent use, offering stability without demand. Buildings stand at measured distances, their walls softened by time, neither damaged nor restored, simply settled. The air feels still and balanced, carrying no wind and no noticeable temperature change. You continue walking at an unforced pace, guided not by destination, but by the absence of any reason to stop or hurry. The city does not acknowledge your presence. Shadows remain fixed along walls and paths, resting where they formed long ago. There are no sounds approaching and no signs of activity returning. The night does not change. Thoughts soften further, fading before forming. Breathing remains slow and automatic. Awareness settles into rhythm. As you continue, the city remains unchanged, holding calm effortlessly. You continue walking as the city reaches a state where even the idea of transition begins to fade, and movement feels less like progress and more like quiet repetition. This part of the city once existed without distinction, neither central nor remote, crossed only when necessary and otherwise ignored. Even during the most active periods of the city's life, this stretch carried no importance of its own, serving quietly in the background without demanding notice. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to settle slowly and evenly across the space. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and evenly shaped, worn gently by long periods of slow passage rather than frequent traffic, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly on either side, their walls softened by age, not weakened and not renewed, simply settled into a final, balanced form. Nothing here feels unfinished or temporary. The air feels neutral and still, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature shift sharp enough to register. You walk at an unforced, steady pace, not guided by destination or curiosity, but by the absence of any reason to move differently. The city does not acknowledge your presence and does not resist it. It simply allows motion to continue. Shadows remain fixed along walls, corners, and edges, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or movement. There are no distant sounds forming and no signals of activity returning. The night does not deepen or fade. It holds its state evenly. Thoughts become slower and less complete, dissolving before they can gather meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains entirely unaffected by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You continue moving through the city as the night settles into a condition where repetition becomes comforting rather than noticeable, and each step feels identical to the last. This area once existed quietly between more familiar spaces, crossed without intention and forgotten immediately afterward. Even during the city's active years, it carried no significance of its own, serving only as a passage rather than a destination. At night, it would have emptied fully, allowing silence to establish itself without resistance. That silence remains complete. The ground beneath your feet feels solid and evenly worn, shaped patiently over long periods of time, not rushed, not repaired, simply allowed to endure. Buildings stand at steady distances, their surfaces softened by age, neither damaged nor renewed, settled into permanence without effort. The air feels balanced and unmoving, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature distinct enough to register. You walk at a slow, natural pace, not because you choose restraint, but because nothing in this space suggests urgency or direction. The city does not guide you forward or pull you back. It allows movement without purpose. Shadows remain fixed along walls, edges, and corners, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unchanged by time or presence. There are no distant sounds approaching and no indications of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lighten. It holds steady, unchanged. Thoughts soften further, losing structure before they can take shape, dissolving quietly without effort. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into rhythm rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains entirely unaffected by your presence, holding its calm state effortlessly, without memory, without expectation, and without interruption. You continue walking as the city settles into a state where sameness becomes complete, and even subtle differences between spaces no longer register. This part of the city once existed quietly alongside daily life, neither avoided nor sought out, crossed simply because it lay in the way. Even during the most active periods, it never gathered attention or meaning of its own. At night, it would have emptied without hesitation, allowing silence to spread evenly and remain undisturbed. That silence still holds the space. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and consistently shaped, worn gradually by long years of slow passage rather than frequent movement, offering stability without demand. Buildings stand calmly at measured distances, their walls softened by age, not weakened, not renewed, but settled into a final, balanced form. Nothing here feels temporary or unresolved. The air feels neutral and still, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature change sharp enough to register. You walk at an unforced, steady pace, not guided by curiosity or direction, but by the absence of any reason to alter your movement. The city does not acknowledge your presence and does not resist it. It allows motion without reaction. Shadows remain fixed along walls, corners, and edges, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or movement. There are no distant sounds emerging and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or fade. It holds steady, unchanged. Thoughts slow further, becoming brief and incomplete, dissolving before they can gather meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains entirely unaffected by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You move forward through the city as the night settles into a state where even awareness feels optional, and the act of walking blends seamlessly into the surrounding stillness. This part of the city once existed quietly beyond routine attention, crossed without thought and remembered only briefly, if at all. Even during times of activity elsewhere, this stretch remained subdued, shaped more by absence than presence. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to settle evenly and remain undisturbed for long hours. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and evenly shaped, worn slowly by long years of gentle passage rather than frequent movement, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly along the path, their surfaces softened by age, not damaged and not renewed, simply settled into permanence. Nothing here suggests transition or expectation. The air feels neutral and still, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature shift distinct enough to register. You walk at a slow, unforced pace, not guided by intention or curiosity, but by the absence of any reason to hurry or pause. The city does not respond to your presence. It neither welcomes nor resists it. Shadows remain fixed along walls and corners, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unchanged by time or movement. There are no distant sounds approaching and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lighten. It holds steady, unchanged. Thoughts soften further, losing structure before they can take shape, dissolving quietly without effort. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains entirely unaffected by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You continue walking as the city settles into a state where even repetition feels settled and complete, and nothing about the space suggests that anything new should happen. This part of the city once existed quietly beyond routine awareness, crossed only when necessary and otherwise ignored. Even during the busiest periods of life elsewhere, this stretch remained subdued, shaped more by absence than activity. At night, it would have emptied entirely, allowing silence to take hold slowly and evenly without resistance. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and consistently worn, shaped patiently over long periods rather than altered by urgency, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly along the path, their walls softened by age, not weakened and not restored, simply settled into permanence. Nothing here suggests transition, expectation, or return. The air feels neutral and still, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature change sharp enough to register. You walk at a slow, unforced pace, not guided by intention or curiosity, but by the absence of any reason to hurry or pause. The city does not respond to your presence. It neither welcomes nor resists it. Shadows remain fixed along walls, corners, and edges, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or movement. There are no distant sounds approaching and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lighten. It holds steady, unchanged. Thoughts soften further, losing structure before they can take shape, dissolving quietly without effort. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation. As you continue onward, the city remains entirely unaffected by your passage, maintaining its calm state effortlessly, complete, resolved, and silent. You continue walking as the city settles into a state where even familiarity dissolves into quiet sameness, and movement feels less like progress and more like continuation within stillness. This part of the city once existed beyond daily concern, crossed without intention and forgotten immediately afterward. Even during periods of activity elsewhere, this stretch remained subdued, shaped more by absence than by use, offering no reason to stop and no reason to hurry. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to settle slowly and evenly across the space without resistance. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and evenly shaped, worn gradually by long years of gentle passage rather than frequent movement, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly at measured distances, their walls softened by age, not damaged and not renewed, simply settled into permanence as if no further change was expected of them. Nothing here feels unfinished or temporary. The air feels neutral and still, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature change distinct enough to register, creating an environment where the body naturally relaxes without instruction. You walk at a slow, unforced pace, not guided by purpose or destination, but by the absence of any reason to move differently. The city does not acknowledge your presence and does not resist it. It simply allows motion to continue. Shadows remain fixed along walls, corners, and edges, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or movement. There are no distant sounds emerging and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lighten. It holds steady. Thoughts soften further, dissolving before they can take shape or gather meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation, as the city continues unchanged around you, calm, resolved. You continue walking as the city begins to feel detached from any sense of sequence, where ideas of beginning and ending slowly lose their meaning. This stretch once served quietly in the background of daily movement, supporting passage without ever defining it. Even when the city was active, this place attracted little attention, offering nothing that invited pause or reflection. At night, it would have emptied early, allowing silence to establish itself fully and remain undisturbed for long hours. That silence remains intact. The ground beneath your feet feels smooth and reliable, shaped patiently over time, not repaired or altered, simply allowed to endure in its original form. Buildings stand quietly along the path, evenly spaced, their surfaces softened by age, not weakened and not renewed, settled into permanence as though no further change was expected. Nothing here suggests renewal, decay, or return. The air feels settled and neutral, free from movement or tension, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature shift sharp enough to register. You walk at a steady, effortless pace, guided not by intention or curiosity, but by rhythm alone. The city does not react to your presence. It neither welcomes nor resists it. Shadows remain unchanged along walls, edges, and corners, resting where they formed long ago, unaffected by passing time. There are no sounds waiting to appear and no signs of change approaching. The night does not progress. It holds its state evenly. Thoughts become shorter and less defined, dissolving before they can gather meaning. Breathing remains calm, slow, and automatic. Awareness settles further, releasing the need to observe, allowing the environment to fade gently into background presence while the city continues unchanged, quiet, and complete. You continue onward as the city settles into a deeper sense of completion, where nothing feels unfinished and nothing suggests that anything should change. This area once existed beyond routine use, crossed briefly and remembered rarely, serving a quiet purpose without calling attention to itself. Even during the city's most active periods, this stretch remained subdued, shaped by consistency rather than movement. At night, it would have been entirely still, allowing silence to settle naturally and remain uninterrupted for long hours. That silence remains unchanged. The ground beneath your feet feels firm and evenly worn, shaped slowly by long years of gentle passage rather than frequent traffic, offering stability without variation. Buildings stand with measured distance between them, their surfaces softened by age, not damaged and not restored, simply resolved into a final, balanced form. Nothing here invites inspection or reflection. The air feels steady and neutral, carrying no wind strong enough to notice and no temperature change distinct enough to register, creating an environment where awareness relaxes without effort. You walk at an unforced, steady pace, not guided by purpose or destination, but by the absence of any reason to hurry or pause. The city does not respond to your presence. It neither welcomes nor resists it. Shadows remain fixed along walls and edges, resting exactly where they formed long ago, unaffected by time or movement. There are no distant sounds emerging and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lighten. It holds steady, unchanged. Thoughts lose structure and drift away quietly before forming into meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness narrows gently, settling into repetition rather than observation, as the city continues to hold its calm state effortlessly, unchanged and complete. You continue walking as the city reaches a state where even the sense of distance begins to soften, and movement no longer feels tied to space or direction. This stretch once existed quietly outside the flow of ordinary attention, crossed without pause and left behind without memory. Even when life moved elsewhere with purpose and urgency, this place remained unchanged, shaped more by stillness than by activity. At night, it would have emptied completely, allowing silence to settle slowly and evenly, without interruption or resistance. That silence remains intact. The ground beneath your feet feels even and dependable, shaped by long periods of slow repetition rather than frequent use, offering stability without drawing attention. Buildings stand calmly on either side, their forms simple and restrained, softened by age, not damaged and not renewed, settled into permanence as though nothing more was required of them. The air feels neutral and balanced, free from movement or temperature strong enough to notice, creating a space where the body naturally relaxes without instruction. You walk at a slow, unforced pace, not guided by intention or destination, but by the absence of any reason to hurry or stop. The city does not react to your presence. It neither acknowledges nor resists it. Shadows remain fixed along walls, corners, and edges, resting where they formed long ago, unchanged by time. There are no distant sounds forming and no signs of activity returning. The night does not deepen or lift. It holds steady. Thoughts become faint and incomplete, dissolving before forming into meaning. Breathing remains slow, even, and automatic. Awareness settles gently into repetition rather than observation, as the city continues unchanged, quiet, and resolved. You continue walking until the city no longer feels like a place you are moving through, but a quiet state you have fully entered. Nothing around you suggests that anything more needs to happen. The city feels complete, settled into a calm that does not require attention or effort. This place once existed alongside ordinary life, used briefly and forgotten easily, and at night it would have rested without resistance. That same rest now fills every part of the space. The ground beneath your feet feels steady and dependable, offering quiet support without variation. Buildings stand calmly, unchanged and unconcerned, holding their positions as they always have, without strain or expectation. The air feels soft and neutral, carrying no signal of change, no sound to anticipate, and no movement to follow. You slow naturally, not because you stop, but because there is no longer any reason to continue walking. The city does not ask anything of you. It does not need your attention. Shadows remain where they are, settled and still. The night holds its balance gently. Breathing becomes deeper and easier, slow and unforced. Thoughts loosen completely, no longer forming or drifting, simply resting. Awareness remains, but it feels light and comfortable, supported by the quiet around you. You are not waiting for anything, and nothing is waiting for you. The city remains calm and resolved, allowing stillness to continue peacefully, carrying you into rest without interruption, without effort, and without expectation.